need to waste a bunch of artifacts. Let's see which. I'm gonna leave this one. And this one also. Maybe. I just whatever. Get rid of it. It's not like I need no specific stats for anyone. Ever, unless you want to do it on set. To trash substats. Crit rate and your charge, crit damage. Would be really cool to have someone whose healing skills with crit stats.
Been on an unignorable collision course, not only here in the UK, but in Europe and the US too. Which isn't entirely without precedent. America in particular has had a well-defined and extremely vocal Christian right for decades. What's new is an apparent embrace of Christianity as part of a much broader political strategy. The political right aren't just trying to appeal to Christian voters, they're placing God front and center of their political messaging for everyone.
This is like an old-time revival, isn't it? An old-time revival.
A cross on wheels is dragged around the Charlie Kirk Memorial Rally in Arizona. A bishop of questionable credentials preaches to an anti-immigration march in London. Peter Thiel delivers a lecture series on the Antichrist. British MP Danny Kruger asserts the inherent Christianness of England in Parliament.
All politics is religious, and in abandoning one religion, we simply create a space for others to move into.
And then there's the conversions. It's not just J.D. Vance discovering Catholicism or Russell Brand conveniently being baptized just as the allegations drop. Jordan Peterson goes to church now, as does the Bell Curve author Charles Murray, as does, of all people, Joseph Rogan.
Wait, are you going to church too, or is that bullshit?
I have been to church.
Oh, fuck.
Why? Have you ever been to church before?
I've been.
It's actually very nice.
In fact, the real bellwether is the about face of many new atheists. Richard Dawkins of the God Delusion fame now describes himself as a cultural Christian.
Insofar as Christianity can be seen as a bulwark against Islam, I think it's a very good thing.
Commentators have suggested that at its most virulent, we might be experiencing a rise of Christian nationalism.
Christian nationalism.
White Christian nationalism.
The phrase Christian nationalism gets thrown around a lot these days.
But I think that's a bit of a misread. For all the airtime the press has given to oddball priests and pastors from fringe denominations, the reality is that whatever apparently Bible-inspired policies conservatives might be pursuing are the least important and interesting part of any of this. And while the apparent rise of so-called Christian nationalism is surely worrying, there's every chance that conservatives' current decision to cling to the cross is not the sign of political strength, but of political weakness. Look at this photograph. This is a snap of J.D. Vance. It was taken in the Cotswolds in the west of England while the Vice President was visiting the UK this August. In particular, it was taken at a barbecue that he threw. And that this is the only publicly available photo of that barbecue is unfortunate, because the other guy in this picture, Thomas Skinner, is almost completely irrelevant to the topic of rising Christian conservatism in global politics. Worse still, he's such a weird and wonderful character that it kind of breaks my heart to not be able to squeeze in a sidebar in which I tell you everything about him.
One thing I will do, and anyone that knows me will say this, I will give it my best shot. Relax, drink a Stella, you know it make you feel better. You know me, I never, ever, ever look when I pour my gravy, because I'm the absolute governor, of course. He's Tom Skinner, Tom Bosh, here's Bosh.
Stay strong, Tom. Vance's trip to the UK wasn't an official one. He was here with his family as a private citizen on holiday. But that didn't mean that he wasn't working. It simply means that outside of a brief carp fishing trip with David Lammy, he was able to snub members of Britain's ruling Labour Party in favour of catching up with fellow travellers on the political right. The most important of these meetings, to my mind, was this barbecue. Because alongside Skinner, Vance had invited two further guests with a little more political and intellectual weight.
I have wrote a speech.
The first is Danny Kruger, a former Conservative MP who has since defected to Nigel Farage's Reform Party.
The Conservative Party is over. Over as a national party. Over as the principal opposition to the left.
In perhaps the funniest case of British nepotism I've come across, he's also the son of Prue Leith from the Great British Bake Off.
Quite often I need 2 holes so that I can squirt.
The final guest that we know about was James Orr. Orr is an associate professor in the Faculty of Divinity at the University of Cambridge, and was recently appointed as a senior advisor to the Reform Party. His greatest influence to date, however, has been as something of a mentor to J.D. Vance during his transformation from Trump explainer and critic to aspiring Trump successor. Politico has described him as Vance's English philosopher king, while Vance himself has apparently called him his British Sherpa. Or, for his part, has played down this relationship, framing it instead as a journey of mutual intellectual growth.
I think that wildly overstates my influence on Senator Vance. If anything, he has been a mentor to me. We've had wonderful conversations over the years about politics, political philosophy, faith, religion. Senator Vance and I have a sort of kind of camaraderie on trying to work out what the new right should look like in the 21st century.
That question of what the new right should look like is key. It's the beating heart not only of J.D. Vance's relationship with Orr, but of all of these conversations surrounding conservatism and Christianity. Because while it might be the case that the far right has rarely been stronger, Vance and Orr recognise that both the MAGA movement in the US and the ever-ascendant Reform Party in the UK have a problem. Or a couple of problems, actually. The first is that both are cults of personality. There's a reason that Steve Bannon won't shut up about Trump running for a 3rd term as president. Trump is MAGA. There remains hope among the top brass that the baton might be passed to J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, but it's far from certain that Trump's coalition would survive that handover.
I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible.
The Reform Party is much the same when it comes to Nigel Farage. A 2024 YouGov poll asked voters what they thought of Lee Anderson, easily the party's second most recognisable MP, and over half of respondents didn't know enough about him to form an opinion. Farage and Trump certainly have strong cults of personality, but neither is scandal-free, and I dread to think what their cholesterol levels are. There's a very real danger that, should anything happen to them, the whole project just unravel.
Have you heard about the Epstein thing that's going on here?
I have.
You have? What do you think about it?
The second problem is that the success of the right over the past decade or so has been almost exclusively built around being against stuff. What James Orr calls the new right is anti-immigration, it's anti-high taxes, it's anti-free trade, it's anti-welfare spending, it's anti-woke, it's often anti-vaccine. All of that is clear. But if I was to ask you to name something that these movements stand for, you'd probably struggle to name much beyond some vague sense of national pride. All of this is fine in opposition, but as Trump learned from his first stint in office, it's less good when you get into power and find that, while your coalition might have been united in what they don't like, they're divided beyond belief in what they do. James Orr has set himself the task of solving this ideological emptiness and giving clearer shape to the movement.
Not sure quite what to call it. It's not really conservative, it's not really liberal. I suppose it's stitched together by a sense that there is an emerging worldview that is very hostile to some of the kind of foundational assumptions that liberals, conservatives, and indeed I think old school socialists share.
More than just sharing this mission of steering the right towards deeper meaning, Orr, Vance, and Kruger also share a creed. They are all practicing Christians. More than this, they're all Christian converts. In fact, even Thomas Skinner now tweets semi-regularly about going to church, despite previously having had a somewhat different take. There's like a tweet from like 2019, it's like, hey lads, anyone got any good excuses for not going to church with my wife this morning? Which is just like such a... Christian converts are a running theme throughout this attempt to mainstream Christian conservatism. Which isn't something that I say to imply that all such conversions are insincere, although clearly they can be. Either way, there's a reason that people talk about the zeal of the convert. Polling shows us that converts tend to be more observant, more enthusiastic, and more certain of their faith than those who were born into a given religion. In the cases of Vance, Orr, and Kruger, this zeal is perhaps amplified by the fact that all adopted theologies which supported rather than challenged their pre-existing secular experience of the world. Orr and Kruger both come from money and were educated at elite boarding schools. Both then found their way to conservative evangelicalism. Orr found his religious feet at Holy Trinity Brompton, an American-style evangelical church which has accepted millions of pounds worth of donations from GB News owner Paul Marshall, who, because of British nepotism, is also the dad of the ex-bassist from Mumford & Sons.
So it was the middle of wokeness, and you had bought a book online.
Yeah, so I bought a book.
What was the book?
It was Unmasked by Andy No, who's a conservative journalist whose beat is Antifa and the BLM riots.
Even if it was Mein Kampf, It's your right to buy a book.
J.D. Vance experienced his flash of divine light on the road to becoming a Republican candidate, and just so happened to stumble into a school of thought known as Catholic integralism, which, like some Republican voters, believes that society should be organized according to certain aspects of conservative Christian doctrine. Like many converts, all three of these figures are dead certain that everyone else would benefit from similarly embracing Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior too. In fact, these three plotters and many others on the political right have seemingly come to the conclusion that a certain form of right-wing Christianity might not only be good for converting souls to Christ, but also for converting voters to conservatism. Yeah, so it looks different in this section because we're filming this on a different day, and even weirder, it's going to go back to looking how it did earlier in a minute. Because we forgot to film a section. So I guess we need to talk about Christian nationalism, which is a phrase that you might have heard a lot lately as a way of describing the new Christianized politics of the right. And we could spend a bunch of time doing the classic video essay thing of tracking this ideology and its history and how it differs from country to country, but we're going to make do with the lightest of overviews. Partly because when it comes down to it, I'm not convinced that Christian nationalism is as important a part of this story as we're led to believe. And secondly, because it's just not that hard of a concept to get your head around. At its broadest, Christian nationalism is a belief and practice which, as Encyclopedia Britannica puts it, seeks to create or maintain a legal fusion of Christian religion with a nation's character.
An American Christian nationalist is someone that believes America is a Christian nation and the government ought to keep it that way.
Like in many belief systems, there's a spectrum to this. On the most liberal end of the scale, we have the reasonably neutral observation that a given country, be that the US, the UK, or wherever else, has been shaped in some way by Christianity. This woollier version of Christian nationalism has been bolstered most recently by another convert, the Rest is History host Tom Holland. No, silly, not Spider-Man! Holland returned to Christianity after a nominal childhood church attendance. Not Spider-Man! Host Tom Holland. No, silly, not Spider-Man! Holland returned to Christianity after a nominal childhood church attendance whilst writing his 2019 book, Dominion.
The thesis of the book essentially is that Christianity is the most transformative and revolutionary ideology that has ever existed, and that in its distinctively Western form, it continues to completely saturate the way that people in the West view the world.
This descriptive vision of the relationship between Christianity and a given country's history, however, can quickly morph into a prescriptive one. Britain, or America, or wherever else, should be a Christian country, and the government should either defend or extend the role of the Christian faith in the life of the nation. At its most extreme, we reach the realms of Pastor Doug Wilson, shepherd to a flock of extreme Christian nationalists including Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of War. Wilson believes that US government policy should be shaped entirely by Christian values, or more specifically, his own ultra-conservative theological views, including a rolling back of women's right to vote and a reinstatement of laws against sodomy.
The collectivists who are in power now use the power of the sword to extort money from middle-class working taxpayers in order to redistribute that money to other people who shouldn't be getting it. That's how they use their power. If we had power, we would stop abortionists.
In truth, Christian nationalism is always a deeply conservative Christian nationalism, for two simple reasons. The first is that the nationalism part of the equation just tends to be anathema to liberal Christians, who tend to celebrate coexistence with other religions rather than wanting to win some clash of creeds. The idea of pursuing a politics which actively excludes non-Christians and non-Christian perspectives is likely to horrify. The second is that any Christian nationalist is always going to be driven by the aspects of their theology which explicitly differ from mainstream secular politics. If you're a pro-choice, LGBT-supporting, feminist Christian, there's a vibrant enough current which is supportive of those things within secular politics that you don't necessarily need to channel it through your faith. Christian nationalists almost always attempt to frame their desire to reshape their country's politics around the Bible as a return to some pre-existing state rather than some novel revolution. American Christian nationalists, for example, claim that despite the First Amendment's ironclad ban on the establishment of an official state religion, that America was still founded as a Christian country.
Remember that we were a collection of states and colonies, and you need to read the state constitutions before anything else. 9 out of 13 of the original states required you to be a Bible-believing Christian to serve in government at the time of the founding. 13 out of 13 required a declaration of faith. 9 out of 13 required you to be a Protestant.
Aspiring theocrats in the UK can rejoice in the fact that they're already one step closer to their goal. England already has an official state religion in the Church of England, with bishops in Parliament and 26% of primary schools being affiliated with the Church.
Because the Church of England is not some private club, just another eccentric denomination. The Church is the chaplain to the nation, and through the parish system, in which every square inch of England has its local church and its local priest, we are all members, we all belong. Even if you never set foot in your church from one year to the next, even if you don't believe in its teachings, it is your church, and you are its member.
Although massive L for conservative Christians lately, as the Church of England is currently preparing to install its first ever female Archbishop of Canterbury.
Settle in as we make sense of the downfall of the United Kingdom and the obliteration of the Church of England through a biblical lens.
To get too caught up in how true these claims to some national Christian continuity are, however, is to somewhat miss the point. I don't mean to pretend that hardcore Christian nationalists like Doug Wilson don't exist, nor that we overlook the various attempts to erode the wall between church and state which are currently ongoing in the US. But these attempts don't entirely feel novel.
So here it is in all its glory, the offending Ten Commandments monument. It's in the surrounding grounds of the Capitol.
What really feels new is the combination of Christianity and Joe Rogan.
I have been to church.
Conservatives are clearly trying to do something new with Christianity. They're trying to use it as a means to extend their coalition. And that attempt to mainstream Christian conservatism, to me, is far more interesting. But why on earth do they think that God might be a winning strategy? To understand the recent increase in religious rhetoric among the right, you have to understand that many Christians across the political spectrum are currently under the impression that there is an ongoing resurgence of Christianity in the West. The roster of high-profile conservatives who have recently converted, they believe, has been accompanied by a new wave of young people who are also finding God.
There is a real revival of religious conviction in our culture, not just our culture, but across the West. It's a real thing. We can officially say that now.
It's a narrative which seems pretty plausible if, like me, you spent a month researching a video on contemporary Christian politics and now have a TikTok feed peppered with videos of trendy young converts going to church or to Christian music festivals.
When we were worshiping earlier in the Zen, I felt like God said so clearly, you are not waiting for a revival, you are living in it now.
The secular press have also gobbled up this tale. I've seen several packages from mainstream news outlets amplifying this idea that going to church is becoming cool again.
We've come to try and put faces to the figures that suggest more and more young people are turning to religion.
When combined with all this chatter about Christian nationalism, the overall effect is to suggest that Christianity is getting both more radical and more popular. In fact, the notion that Christianity is experiencing this big revival works in some ways to legitimize the spike in politicians and political commentators talking about God. They're simply responding to a popular demand.
You know, I've recently become a Christian. That don't mean you have to become a Christian. I mean, it's working for me pretty well. I feel an incredible relief.
And yet, this much reported Christian revival isn't quite what it seems. The biggest spike in stories about this supposed resurgence in the UK came in April 2025, following the publication of polling by the Bible Society, which claimed to have discovered something astounding. Church attendance among young people had absolutely exploded. As recently as 2018, just 4% of 18 to 24-year-olds both described themselves as Christian and went to church at least once a month. Just 6 years later, that number had shot up to 16%. There was a similar jump among 25 to 34-year-olds too, and this trend appeared particularly strong among young men. 21% of British men between the ages of 18 and 24 are apparently now both Christian and attending church at least once a month. That's more than 1 in 5. The Bible Society wrapped all this data up in a 46-page report which they titled The Quiet Revival, which soon became a buzzword in Christian media. That the Bible Society described this revival as quiet, however, is fitting, because every other piece of hard data we have points in precisely the opposite direction. This revival seems to be so quiet as to maybe be non-existent. See, the Bible Society data was what's called self-reported. It relied simply on asking people whether and how often they go to church and trusting their answers, which is pretty normal for polling, but this was kind of unnecessary. The largest Christian denominations in the UK actually collect their own data on church attendance, and they take the somewhat more robust approach of asking vicars or church wardens to actually count how many people are in the room on a given Sunday. When the Church of England published its annual attendance report this October, it noted that whilst attendance was recovering from an understandable dip during COVID, the long-term trajectory of decline simply hasn't been stopped. Ken Eames, the report's author, wrote in no uncertain terms that by almost every measure in almost every diocese, Church of England attendance and participation was still significantly lower in 2024 than in 2018. Data from the Catholic Church is less detailed, but similarly shows a drop in attendance from 702,000 in 2019 to just over 575,000 in 2024. Writing in the academic magazine The Conversation, David Voas further highlights that the Quiet Revival poll findings are contrary to plenty of other polling on the same issue which has been undertaken during this period. It also seems fair to suggest that if 1 in 5 young men have become regular church attenders, that would likely be a phenomenon it would have been impossible not to have noticed. And there just aren't stampedes of young lads marching down the street at 8:45 AM each Sunday morning. Voas pointed to several reasons the poll might have been flawed. He highlighted in particular that respondents to YouGov polls of this type are both self-selecting and are paid for their responses. This can open up the possibility of people just trying to crack through responses rather than giving accurate information. Polling also just isn't a particularly good way of measuring things that people do. Not only are people prone to lying to make themselves sound good, but lying about whether and how often one goes to church is the classic example of something that people choose to lie about.
It's not only that we're going to church services less. Actually, I have to report to you that there's recently been some research by sociologists in which they've checked up the answers to public opinion polls. They've asked people, did you go to church last week? And then they've gone to look in the pew to see whether you actually were there. And I have 2 disturbing bits of evidence to report to you. First of all, we fib a lot when we're asked that question.
Commentators who would quite like the Quiet Revival narrative to be true have attempted to defend this outlier finding through various means. It's happening entirely in smaller denominations, or vicars are counting wrong. The biggest reach I found was from the authors themselves, who suggested that the new converts might be tuning in via Zoom, but they're all sharing laptops and so are being undercounted that way. Yeah, and if I accounted for all the people who are getting together to watch my YouTube videos in cinemas, I'd probably have bigger numbers than Mr. Beast. The reality is that this uptick in church attendance is most likely just bunk. It simply isn't happening. If this is the case, it mirrors a similar phenomenon in America, where articles celebrating a supposed revival are countered by data which shows that, at best, the proportion of Americans going to Christian churches has stabilized after decades of decline. If the Quiet Revival report has any truth to it, then it doesn't seem to have found that young people and young men in particular are going to church more, but simply that they're lying about going to church more. Which might actually be more interesting than if they were actually showing up. See, the comparable data from the US is pretty revealing. The results of the Pew Research Center's 2023 to 2024 Religious Landscape Study found that 18 to 24-year-old men were now slightly more likely to identify with a religion than women of the same age. This marks a massive turnaround in a country where women have historically felt more compelled to warm the pews on a Sunday morning.
Get up, Homer. It's time for church.
I want to go.
Interestingly though, where young men are more likely to describe themselves as religious, they're still less likely to regularly pray or even to say that their professed religion is very important to them. It's important to caveat that the overall trend of both religious identification and church attendance is still one of wholesale decline. If anything notable is taking place at all, it is a tiny bump in the number of young men identifying as Christian, either directly or by lying about going to church. That they're not actually turning up or praying or saying the religion they've adopted is all that important suggests that faith itself isn't all that key to this. Instead, the identification is the goal. In fact, more than simply debunking the part of the Christian nationalist narrative which suggests that an advocacy for religiously informed policymaking is a response to a quiet revival in their faith of choice, all of this actually reveals a lot about why conservatives have become so obsessed with God in the first place. When faced with footage of tracksuit-wearing evangelical Christians marching into Soho, or photos of J.D. Vance talking with members of the Reform Party, it can be easy to frame British Christian conservatism as an imported offshoot of the American Christian right. The charismatic, low-church evangelicalism of some of these recent displays, after all, shares far more with American megachurch culture than it does with traditional high-church Toryism.
Hello, I'm Geraldine. Believe you're expecting me.
No, I'm expecting our new vicar. Unless, of course, you are the new vicar and they've landed us with a woman. Some sort of insane joke.
Finally got a clip from the Vicar of Dibley into a video. Wait till I get started on the episode where she has to eat all the Christmas dinners, which I mention all the time. This isn't entirely inaccurate. King's Army Field Marshal Scott McNamara lives in Orlando, Florida. And Holy Trinity Brompton, which is the spiritual home of evangelicalism within the Church of England, was heavily inspired by the Association of Vineyard Churches in the US. And because of British nepotism, the key link is Eleanor Mumford, who is the mum of Marcus Mumford from Mumford & Sons. Usually there's no Mumford & Sons references in my videos, and you know, this one we've had 2.
What about 3?
Nevertheless, the current attempt to use Christianity to give new meaning to the mainstream you know, this one we've had 2.
What about 3?
Videos, and you know, this one we've had 2.
What about 3?
Nevertheless, the current attempt to use Christianity to give new meaning to the mainstream political right perhaps has greater origins in Europe than we might like to admit. In 2017, Rogers Brubaker wrote an article in Foreign Affairs outlining the emergence of a new set of rhetorical tropes among populist anti-migrant politicians in Europe. Figures like Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders, he wrote, increasingly positioned themselves as defenders of a Judeo-Christian European civilization rather than only their own national culture. This was despite the fact, he continued, that Europe is the most secular region of the world with extremely low rates of church attendance. Christianity, he argued, wasn't being used out of any particular commitment to the faith itself, but as a locus of cultural identity.
I will never be silenced, and I will never follow in the footsteps of those weak politicians who have opened Europe's borders, who impoverishing and endangering our people, selling out our Judeo-Christian civilization to those who shout the anti-Semitic choruses in our streets today.
Brubaker coined the term Christianism to refer to such uses of Christianity as a political rather than religious vehicle. Christianism, he writes, is a matter of belonging rather than believing, a way of defining us in relation to them. The them which was being rejected by Le Pen and Wilders was Muslim immigrants. And Islamophobia remains a powerful force in the attempt to redress right-wing populism in the clothes of Christianity. This is abundantly clear in Richard Dawkins's about-face. Dawkins didn't start describing himself as a cultural Christian because he'd suddenly found common ground with the Christian church. This is the man who wrote The God Delusion, for crying out loud.
There is something insidious about training children to believe things for which there's no evidence. Merely to say that religion is harmless isn't good enough.
He was actually pretty open that he was mostly motivated by his throbbing Islamophobia.
Insofar as Christianity
can be seen as a bulwark against Islam, I think it's a very good thing.
When I began looking into the conversion of right-wing activist Tommy Robinson, it took less than a minute of the first video that I found of him talking about his new faith for him to start complaining about Muslims.
When I watched, it was the Paris Olympics, and the opening ceremony was satanic. And it was a total attack on Christianity and the core beliefs of Christianity and Jesus. It was disgusting. And if someone who wasn't out to defend Christianity at every point, I watched it and just thought, that's done my head in watching that. They would not do that for Islam or Muhammad.
The new apostles of conservative Christianism have added further thems to their list of opponents since 2017.
The left, I call it the radical left, I call it sometimes the radical left lunatics.
Christianists like Le Pen and Wilders used to celebrate the extent to which European Christianity had come to accept certain aspects of progressive change.
Because we know that without our Judeo-Christian civilization, there would be no separation of church and state.
This was contrasted with Islam, which is portrayed as being completely uncompromising and wanting to install Sharia law wherever it goes. The new wave of Christianist nationalists makes no such compromises. Vance, Orb, and others frame secularism as every bit as much the enemy as would the most extreme Islamist imam.
You may just be a card-carrying atheist, but you still will recognize that religion is a real phenomenon in human history. And you'll recognize that actually modernity is engaged in a kind of very large, uncontrolled experiment in seeing how we can get on, large societies can function without the one thing that all human societies up until, in the scheme of human history, 5 minutes ago, had as central.
There's a generous reading of this which sees them as merely mourning the loss of religion in the abstract as a means of community and shared meaning. But it remains Christianity in particular which is being mourned.
For all these long years, from the time of Alfred to the time of Victoria, it was assumed that a nation was a community of common worship and that our community, this country, worshipped the Christian God. Then in the 20th century, another idea arose, that it is possible for a country to be neutral about God, that the public space, the public square was empty of any metaphysics, that the route to freedom lay through the desert of materialism and individual reason, no hell below us, above us only sky.
Furthermore, Christianist nationalism is conservative Christianist nationalism. Liberal Christianity appears in these conversations as an oxymoron.
My final claim is progressivism and Christianity are at odds.
The result is that the obsession with the UK or the US or wherever else being a Christian nation becomes a roundabout way of declaring that country to be a conservative nation. To not be a conservative is to be in some way other, an enemy within.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
Political enemies are thus instantaneously transformed into national enemies of the state. And yet, where proponents of the mainstreaming of Christianism really differ from their European forebears is in the renewed focus on the us part of the equation. Conservatives clearly see Christianity as having the potential to give new energy to their movement. At its most basic, the hope is that finding some common mythos might serve as a coagulant to a movement which is hyper-prone to splits and defections.
I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026. And I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future.
Now, you sort of fell out with Reform UK. I think it was back in early March, towards the end of February, that kind of thing. And one of the problems...
Well, I think correctly, they fell out with me.
The vague suspicion of power which defines the populist right at present might be replaced with something which looks a bit more like an actual ideology. Two recent events which took place this December, one on either side of the Atlantic, demonstrated the potential of this conservative turn to God. The first was the Unite the Kingdom rally, London's largest far-right rally in decades and decades. In a manner which is actually quite rare for the British far-right, Christianity was inescapable.
With every culture, or more or less every culture, a religion is attached to it. With our British culture is Christianity. We are a Christian country. We adhere to Christian values, principles, and morals.
People talk about our culture being Christian. They've forgotten that we are constitutionally Christian. What do you think these flags represent? They represent various saints of our country. They are Christian flags. Our national anthem is a Christian hymn.
They have attacked the family. They've attacked Christianity. They've opened the borders.
What a lot of the woke stuff is, it's actually super racist. It's super sexist, and it's often it's anti-religion, but only anti-Christian. Like, why only anti-Christian? That's unfair.
A week later came Charlie Kirk's memorial service in Glendale, Arizona. With the lineup dominated by members of the Trump administration, this was perhaps the clearest template yet of how this Christian nationalist fervor might integrate with state power.
We will defend this world. We will defend goodness. We will defend light. We will defend virtue. You cannot terrify us. You cannot frighten us. You cannot threaten us. Because we are on the side of goodness, we are on the side of God.
So I guess I would just say this gathering and God's presence, God's very obvious presence in this room, the presence of Jesus, is a reminder of what we've known for 2,000 years, which is any attempt to extinguish the light causes it to burn brighter. Every single time.
This is like an old-time revival, isn't it? An old-time revival.
At both events, Christianity, or at least Christianism, was invoked as a source of internal political energy. Not something to be opposed to, but to stand for. It also works to graft a history onto a populist right which kind of lacks one.
Why did I become a Catholic? I mean, there are all these things that I could point to, but one, I really liked that the Catholic Church was just really old.
As the age of non-committal irony passes and people search for sincerity, all this helps to transform MAGA, the Reform Party, and the various insurgent right-wing parties of Europe from relatively young, unknown entities into the inheritors of a 2,000-year Christian legacy. Passing the baton from Trump to Vance or Farage to whomever should follow him can thereby be framed as less significant than it once did. This appeal to Christianity is an attempt to build something bigger and long-lasting. But whether that's likely to work or not seems less certain. Watching conservatives get excited about the prospect of using Christianity to widen and deepen their coalition, it's hard not to see a political faction which is a little bit high on its own supply. Vance and his allies in the US will almost certainly have some success in passing a slate of Christian nationalist policies. And this will be a red rag to the Christian right, who are already besotted with Trump. How much any of this actually appeals to the wider tent which put Trump back in the White House, let alone anyone outside of the MAGA coalition, is another question entirely. Here in Europe, the climb is even steeper. What makes this particular political moment unique is that high-ranking conservatives clearly want to do more than simply co-opt the iconography of Christianity. They want to use actual faith and theology to recharge and sustain their movement. The challenge is that too many of those who they see as potential converts don't really have much interest in the actual substance of the faith, which questions how sustainable any of this is. Maybe Joe Rogan finds God. But if he or any of his listeners are only really popping their heads into church because it's currently on trend for conservatives to do so, it seems unlikely that they're still going to be going in 6 months' time. Others might quickly find that, while they do occupy that slightly woollier end of the Christian nationalist spectrum in which Christianity holds some cultural importance to them, they actually do think that the likes of Doug Wilson or whoever else are pretty nuts. It's easy to view the current collision of Christianity and conservatism across the West as a sign of a political movement at the height of its powers, which is finally able to enact its deepest desires. But there's every chance that what we're actually seeing is a movement which is stalling, playing the greatest hits, and which is about to find out that the deafening chorus that they think is singing along with them is really just in their heads. Perhaps the most egregious overextension of the weirdness of Christian conservatism has been the war on the concept of empathy that Vance and others have been waging. This is something which Lindsay Ellis dug into in her recent 2.5-hour video essay about Trump, Palestine, and Miss Rachel. It was, typically for Lindsay, an absolute banger. What you might not know is that while Lindsay has taken a step back from making videos for YouTube over the past few years, she's still been releasing stuff over on Nebula, the premium streaming service that both of us are a part of. Nebula has a whole catalogue of exclusive and characteristically funny and fascinating videos by Lindsay on everything from Disney flop eras to Guy Fieri, Jurassic Park, and most recently, Bluey adults. As you would expect from the creator who kind of invented the YouTube video essay, they are all absolutely fantastic. Lindsay's exclusive videos are part of a whole catalogue of original content which is only available on Nebula. That includes my debut feature-length film Boomers, which is just over a year old now. There's also Scav, the fantastic new documentary series from the Wendover Productions team. There's Jesse Gender's film Identities. There is so much that it would be impossible. What's left for me to do is to say a massive thank you to the people who support us to make videos like this on the top.
Hank Green.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. It looked like I just checked this to see what your name was.
Make sure you knew who I was.
I was just checking it was turned on, but sometimes I do have to do that. On one occasion, I've got my guest's name
who the
wrong,
heck is this guy?
and it was a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
Although, have you seen that clip of Stephen Bartlett from The Diary of a CEO, where it's the first time he had Dr. K on, and he tells the story that he'd done the research for the wrong guest. So he has this guest on, and you can watch the episode online, and it starts with him going, imagine, suppose someone like knew nothing about you. How would you describe your work to them? And then he does this 2-hour-long interview, which is an extraordinary.
That's how you should do every one.
I know, right? But we're not doing that today.
It saves you so much time.
We're not doing that today because I have seen your work.
Okay,
Hank
great.
Green, and I'm extremely fond of it, and it is all over the place. So many different things.
I do not say no to an idea.
Yeah, and one of those ideas that you spoke about recently was aliens.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to just ask you about aliens, but you did a video before about the Fermi paradox.
Okay, yeah.
And I wanted to ask you something about that.
Okay.
Can we start?
Uh-huh.
What is the Fermi paradox?
So that's just the idea that if I like to start here. If natural selection selects for growth, which is the thing it selects for. So if there will be more of whatever is able to make more of itself if you sort of give pine trees infinite air and soil and sunlight, there will be infinite pine trees. So if that is the case, and we can see technologically how it would be possible for a self-replicating system to move from star to star, which is possible in the order of the age of the universe, that there should be signs of other things like us, whatever you want to define that. And whether that would be like them having gotten here before we happened, and so we never would have happened because they were here and colonizing us in some way, or just signals throughout the galaxy, weird Dyson sphere signals or radio waves or whatever, just things that look not natural, which we've just never seen. We've never found anything that looks definitively not natural. And if something would be selecting for like there's energy everywhere, then there should be enough stuff to take up all the energy for some kind of self-replicating system. Why aren't they there? Where is it? What's the reason? There has to be a reason, and then from there you can have lots of fun conversations about everybody's different solution for the Fermi paradox, which is a thing I love. I love to ask people this, and some people, like some science communicators, are like, this is a dumb conversation, I'm tired of having it. And I'm like, well, that's not me. I'll have it forever. I think that it says a lot about us as individuals, because it is just guessing. There are things you can do to like empirically think about it, but like I think it's a lot of guessing, and it's kind of fun to do the guessing.
Yes, and when you made that video, the thing that jumped out at me was that you said something. You went on to like talk about the Fermi paradox and aliens, but at the beginning you said something like, but I'm like a bit of a rare Earthist. Like I think that Earths are actually quite rare, and I can talk more about that if you want me to.
And I never did. I should do that at some point.
Yeah, I'd quite like to know what you mean by that.
I think that if you count up all of the things that are nice about Earth, you end up with them probably not being that common. So of course, like objects weirdly, I'll start here. Weirdly, Earths are particularly hard to discover.
Yes.
So this is annoying. This is just like the different systems we have for detecting exoplanets. They are really good at detecting larger planets or closer in planets. So, and I can go to the details there, but like that is just a thing that is true about how we find exoplanets. And so finding like medium-sized planets that are kind of far out, you just find fewer of them, not because there are fewer of them, but because the way that we detect planets is worse at detecting.
But why is it? Why can't it detect those?
So the main way that we detect exoplanets is that planetary system has to be perfectly aligned so that the star and the planet passes in front of the star from our vantage. And solar systems, planetary systems are not oriented with any, like in any way.
Right.
So they're all different orientations. So the vast majority of them are oriented in such a way so that planets do not pass in front of the star. And so but if the star is closer in, you can actually like see it even if it's at a little bit of a tilt. So there, like Mercury might be visible if it's a little bit tilted, but Earth wouldn't be because it would be above from like the perspective of coming straight at it like this.
Right.
And then larger planets can do other things, like they can make the star wobble. That's how we initially found the first exoplanet. And so like a large close-in exoplanet can create this wobbling. But smaller planets that are further out are just harder to see.
So smaller ones close by pass by the sun from our vantage, so you sort of measure the light.
Yeah, you measure
dimming slightly,
the dipping of the light of the star.
And the bigger ones further out, they're not as perfect in their orbit, but they make the star...
I don't know that they do. If they're further out, I don't think that they do make the star wobble, but there's something that makes bigger, like all the Neptunes easier to detect. I don't know if it's just that they're literally larger. I don't think it is.
Yeah, but then, okay, so, but that on its own doesn't mean that Earth-like planets are rare. It just means about it spotting
it means about spotting them. So Earth-like planets, I think they're probably not that rare. So like a planet roughly in the size of Earth. I think what's probably pretty rare is to have water, and what's even more rare is to have water and land. Now this doesn't sound doesn't seem impossible, but I think that water and land is actually maybe vital for something like humans happening. So like life had a long time to just be in the water, way longer than life has had to be on the land. And there seems to be something about being on land that like pushes animals in a different direction, which I think is very interesting. And there's like ideas about why. But I think that like chemistry would be very hard to do. Like if you were trying to be a technological species, technology is just harder in the water because it's harder to like create, like instead of having pots of liquids to do chemistry with, you'd have to have pots of gases to do chemistry with, and then you put pots of liquid into those pots and it's just like harder. So I think that's a trickier thing, but it also just seems like all of the smartest animals in the ocean came from the land.
Yeah, don't they sort of come out and then go back in again?
Like all the cetaceans.
Yeah.
They like developed their big brains on land and then took them back into water, which is very interesting. And that, like, sorry to octopuses and cephalopods, I know people are mad at me about that immediately, but like they're like a different kind of intelligence, and they've been around for so long, and they didn't do a lot of what cetaceans did.
Do we know why they crawled back into the water again?
I mean, I'm sure that somebody
Maybe
does.
we should do that. I don't know. I
have you done it? It's wonderful.
It's nice, isn't it? I don't feel like, I don't feel as though my brain would function very well down there for very long, but I suppose evolution takes a long time.
Yes.
There's one animal that started in the water, that came out of the water, went back into the water, and then came back out of the water again, and I can't remember which one it is. I think it's like a tortoise or something.
There's an isopod that has done that too.
Really? That's so...
Which is like those little roly-polies.
It's like they sort of can't make their mind up, which is a good reminder, a helpful reminder that evolution is not like...
It's not going in a direction.
It's not targeted, right? It's just sort of stuff that...
If you can... Anything that helps you make more of yourself, there will be more of that trait.
But there does seem something qualitatively different about human beings. And there's a lot of debate about what it is that makes us so special, because although, we would say that because it's us, it does feel like we can do some like really interesting things, like build skyscrapers and radio and transistors that are the size of like how fast your fingernail grows in 3 seconds. I worked that out the other day. A modern transistor, its size is as wide as your fingernail grows
in 3 seconds.
In 3 seconds, yeah. And like it seems like, you know, dolphins can't do that. Maybe they're in the water. Chimpanzees can't do that. What do you think is the defining human quality?
I feel like we skipped over rare earths too fast. But
that might be true.
I'll have to make that video where I get into more details there. But one of the things that I think is...
We're on rare bipeds now.
Very, like, a underestimated importance to the development of complex life and the complex multicellular life and vertebrates and all of this is 4.5 billion years. It's just a long time. So life has probably been on Earth for around 4 billion years. And it has been one continuous unbroken chain of a self-replicator self-replicating. And there have been like blips that were bad. There have been mass extinctions. But like the sun is very stable. We've actually seen this. That's easier to test. The sun is much more stable than the average sun-like star. So that's weird. And then we have this like nice stable orbit. We've got this stable system, but also just the amount of time is a big deal. And there are opportunities for it to have happened for a long time. But like this level of stability for this long, I think might be something quite unusual about Earth. And I think that it might take a really long time for life to go from like a self-replicator at a deep sea vent to, you know, microphones.
But when we say rare, we'll go back to it. When we say rare, what are we talking about? Because
when we're talking about the Fermi paradox, it has to be extremely rare because there are a lot of star systems in the galaxy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's the same. It's kind of similar to time, where it's easy to say 4.5 billion years.
Yeah,
but that's like a really, really long time.
Yeah, I like to say that it's around a third of the life of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like, people think of the universe as very old, and it's like, yeah, but like life has been like a single instance of far from equilibrium chemical self-replication has been going on for a third of the life of the universe, and like it's in you right now. It's happening, and that's how your fingernail grows.
Yeah. That kind of thing? You hear like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying it as a way to like blow your mind and make you sort of filled with awe and wonder about the universe. Does that kind of thought like do that for you? Because for some people it's kind of nihilistic. For some people it's like, whoa, we're like this tiny blip.
I think if you think about the size of the Earth in terms of the universe, that can feel kind of like, well, none of this could possibly matter. But if you think about like, what if the Earth was a third of the size of the universe? Because we are a third of the time of the universe. What if life was a third of the size of the universe? Because life is a third of it's been going for a third of the time of the universe. And that makes me feel like I'm actually part of something very important.
That's interesting. You know, time is just one of these dimensions, isn't it? And it's an important one. But also, actually, I asked Neil deGrasse Tyson about this, and he said something which I sort of hadn't properly considered, which is like, you can also go down, like you can zoom out, but you can also zoom in. And if you consider your size relative to like the smallest possible thing, it's also like unfathomably distant. And it's kind of easier to think of it downwards than upwards. But I would sort of guess that we are probably roughly like slap bang in the middle.
We are like slap bang in the middle. Like, but it's a very weird thing that it seems like if you look at the sort of the size of the whole universe and then the size of the smallest unit of size, we're kind of right in the middle, which is very strange.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about like unfathomably small, like the Planck length, the sort of so-called,
like way smaller than an electron or whatever.
I heard someone say, we'll fact check this, or maybe we won't, that like, you know, the Planck length to an atomic nucleus is about the same ratio as like us to an atomic nucleus. Like it's that level of like how small it is, which is kind of insane to think about. But yeah, you can sort of go both ways, and we're sort of slap bang in the middle of you know, spatial extension, taking up a third of the universe on a very, you know, peculiar kind of planet that seems really you know, well suited to bring about those conditions. Is that just like, like that just kind of happened? Is that, you know, like, what do you think? Is there like a philosophical response that you have to such a sort of incredible mystery, or are you just sort of like?
I think that like I guess my philosophical response is like, I think we're probably one of the most interesting things in the universe.
Yeah, for sure. You mean you and me?
Yeah, specifically the two of us. Yeah, well, certainly the humans are one of the most interesting things in the known universe, definitely. Like, life is the most interesting thing in the known universe. And that, like, goes to how much we're interested in it. Like, I think we are appropriately interested in it, you know. I think nature documentaries and cancer biologists all together, like, are appropriately interested in, like, this really weird thing that is going on. But yeah, what was the deeper the other philosophical question you were asking there?
I was just wondering, like, some people sort of look at this and they feel really, really excited. They're like, cool, I'm part of this big thing.
Yeah.
And some people feel like, oh, right, I'm just one part of this, like, really, really big thing, and I wonder which sort of side of the coin you're on there. And
yeah, I mean, if it was like some big thing that I didn't think was important, one of the sort of, I think that there's, like, nobody who's ever lived that didn't change the world some. Even the people who lived for, like, 2 days, and I think that there's nobody who's ever changed the world by themselves, So, like, we're all a part of this thing, and the way that culture constructs itself is in a lot of ways very reflective of the way that biology constructs itself. So, like, there's like lots of natural selection going on in culture all the time. Like, we don't upload YouTube videos that fail, like, if we try something out and it works really badly, people don't like it. We don't do it again. So, advertisers don't use advertisements that don't work. And so they sort of all settle in on familiar patterns, and they convergently evolve into selling toothpaste with scantily clad hot people. So I think that we are of the living things. There are people who get mad at me about this, but I think that of the living things, we are definitely among the most interesting. And I mean, would someone get mad at me about that? We are definitely among the most interesting.
It's the internet.
Someone will get mad about something I say today. But we all get to participate in it and, like, do our like it's such a weird, like, 8 billion people on a planet all kind of making it work for the most part, obviously not entirely, doesn't seem like it would work.
Yeah.
And yet it does. And, like, what are the different forces that are making it work? Like, how are we building a society together? How are we building family together? How are we building community together? That's just, like, the work of all of us. And you wouldn't think that any particular, cyanobacteria mattered. And, like, kind of doesn't, but, like, it's all, like, it's almost wrong to think of any individual cyanobacteria as an individual, in the same way that, like, obviously humans are individuals, but there is this way in which we aren't, in which we are creating something that is emergent from us, that is much more interesting than any of us individually, much more complex than any of us individually, and I think ultimately more important than any of us individually.
There's a bit of a sort of, our cultural moment is very individualistic, right? It's very
really
sort of me, I, and
it's historically unusual how it is right now.
We'll get back to Hank in just a moment, but first, if you've been watching this show for any amount of time now, you'll know that I talk a lot about media bias. Bias is a huge problem, and it's never going to go away, but wouldn't it be great if there were a way for us as consumers of online material to navigate this space, objectively comparing the way that different sources are representing the same story? Well, that is exactly and I wonder if it's historically unusual, therefore, to have this particular, like, brand of nihilism, that being a part of this grand thing is actually, like, a bad thing.
Well, we used to have more coherent culture-wide stories. And, like, you talk about this, this stuff much better than I do.
Well, I mean, one of those big ones is religion, and we talk about religion a lot, but it's not just religion, right? Like, I think about the reason why America works as a secular experiment is because although, it was founded in a pretty secular manner, it had, like, stories. You've got Washington and the cherry tree or something, right? And you've got like the founding fathers. And I sometimes say it seems like when I watch debates from like the 70s or 80s, it seems like debates were kind of settled just by figuring out like what the founding fathers said.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, Thomas Jefferson thought this, and everyone goes, "Oh, okay then."
Yeah,
you know, like they're quoting some religious
that
figure.
still works on me to some extent.
You think?
A little bit for me particularly. Yeah. I'm like, well, in part because you had a bunch of people who were trying to figure out a way to do a thing in a very new way, and like it did kind of work.
Yeah,
it has gotten better.
Yeah,
over time, which they allowed for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, remains an imperfect system, but they set up a system that was, you know, I look at New Zealand or something, like a more recent democracy where they had some others to go off of when they planned theirs, and I was like, yeah, there's some things there that are better than our way, but like we didn't have any idea how to do a democracy. It was an entirely new idea, and the amount that the world has changed in those 275 years is so huge. What is it now? 200, something like that.
What, since the Declaration?
Yeah.
Isn't it like nearly 250?
Nearly 250.
I feel like people are talking about...
We're about to get to 250.
And that'd be next year, 2026, I think. Yeah.
And that amount of change that the system allowed for is kind of remarkable.
Yeah, and in many ways that was sort of how it was designed, I suppose. But it wasn't like they wrote into the Constitution and the Declaration like these national origin stories, but it kind of had that revolution. Look at the artwork, you know, this sort of Washington
they knew what they were
Delaware
doing.
And
they knew what they were doing in the same way that everybody who's ever created a religion knew what they were doing.
Yeah, right.
You know, like you have to create the myths.
Yeah. And do you think we have a current sort of cultural myth, or is it just like...
We have a really fractured bunch of cultural myths.
Yeah. It feels that way. It feels like there's sort of nothing unifying. And so when people talk...
And I'm sure that it's always been fractured. Like nationalism is always going to be more fractured than a religion. Like you don't get to have a pope. And if you do, then that's actually quite bad. Like there are some places that do kind of get to have the pope of nationalism. We call those dictators.
Yes.
And it's like it's supposed to be messy.
And like, yeah, there does seem to be something different though about like now versus then. And sometimes people say it's like we've lost our national story or we've lost our religious faith. And I'm like, we've also like developed like telecommunication algorithms and I'm sort of like trying to work out who's right here. It does seem like there's something kind of going on with people not being very happy, and I wonder, do you think that is actually something new? Do you think there is really something different about the world today, or is it like nothing new ever happens?
I think there's something new about the world today. I worry a lot about the hopelessness of what happens to you when you're exposed to every terrible thing in the world, which is just relatively new. And then when I call it, this is such a silly thing, but in my head I call this the sad gap. So there's this period of time between when you find out about a terrible problem and when you find out that people are working on it. And it can be pretty wide. And if you're only ever exposed to the terrible problems and you never see the history of how terrible problems have been taken on in the past, the current crop of people who are doing technology or policy or cultural work to try and address those problems, then all you ever see is the bad news. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I feel like I can give is focus. Like find something that is your biggest concern and go after that. And there are absolutely some problems in the world that are, I think there's a lot of attention paid to them in part because they are so insoluble, because they are so contentious as well. Like we tend to pay more attention to the ones that people disagree about. And but to pick, and you know, early in my career I picked climate change, and it was like a years long process to go from this is not a solvable problem and just sort of being exposed to more and more reasons why it is hard. And that's almost a kind of nice. Like there's something to being exposed to the reasons why a problem is hard that actually creates hope, because the real hopeless thing is thinking this problem is huge and the only reason it exists is evil. Like it is caused by evil, and if only we could all just sort of like do one dumb, easy thing, the problem would go away. But like you look at cancer or you look at climate change and you find problems that are actually quite hard to solve. Like there's 8 billion of us and we all need to eat. And we have preferences, and you can't take away the things people have already had. You can't say you don't get a fridge anymore. You can't say you can't fly to see your grandma. Like you have to keep all of these things that we have already added to the world, because if you take them away, people will be very angry. But then you have to create energy in new ways, and like we didn't know how to do that, and now we do. And now, like for sure, throughout the entire process, there have been people trying to like desperately stop it from happening because they own the oil that's in the ground, and if they can't get it out and sell it, they can't make that money. So yeah, there have been people trying to stop it, and those people, I think, are motivated entirely, like largely by greed. They probably think that, you know, they think about the good that they are doing for society as well as their own power and greed. Yeah. For sure. Like they think about, well, you like driving your car, you know, you like the gasoline, you like the plastic bottles. But I think that those brakes have been put on in a way that is very unjust and very like infuriating. But the problem isn't easy. And so that is almost a hopeful thing when you realize, oh, actually there's all these interconnected things that actually make this quite hard. And then there's like a step after that where you're like, and so that problem is being solved in this way. Concrete's being solved in this way. You know, the electric stoves are going to work this way. How are we going to get people off of natural gas in the home? How does a heat pump work? What is the future of advanced geothermal? Like all of this stuff where it's like there isn't a way to fix everything. But once you pay a lot of attention to a problem, and then you actually like don't just become more hopeful, you become useful.
Yeah.
Because you know about a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So then how do you cultivate that kind of attitude? I mean, yourself, like I sometimes get asked about this because I don't like social media. I don't think there's anyone on earth who is like, yeah, I feel good about my relationship with social media. It's about right.
I'll say that there have been times in my life when I've loved it.
Yeah.
When I really, when it's just felt like the world's most exciting playground.
Yeah.
And then it inevitably, like some new platform comes up and I'm like, I love this. And then 2 or 3 years later, I'm like, actually,
all the bad stuff.
It turns out it did the same thing as all the other social media platforms.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're in quite a unique position in that, like, you know, we have people who listen to us and they follow us, and that can make it all the more fun. And it's also our job, and that's awesome.
Get paid. Yeah.
Yeah. But then at the same time, I'm like, I know what this is doing to people's brains, and this is really horrible, and it's causing, like, you know, depression.
Making society much less stable. So like it's not good for anybody.
So what can we do? Are we like the oil conglomerate CEO being like, yeah, it's not great, but you know, like you love your car, and like, but when really we just kind of want to keep our jobs. Like,
I made a video about this because John and I, my brother, and who we create together, he says, are we like cigarettes? Like, are we the cigarettes?
Yeah.
Which is not a great feeling to be asking yourself whether you're cigarettes. But what the video I made about this was talking in terms of food, which is like information is good, but just like food is good. Like nobody's going to disagree with either of those sentences. But if you put systems onto food that are like, how do you compete in the most ultra competitive environment? How do you make sure that people eat as much of this as possible? How do you you know, get people addicted to this food so that they can't stop eating it? That's bad. And that's like kind of where we are with food a little bit. Like another thing to remember is that America is one of the few like right now, well, this is as we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Messy time to say this, but where like food is abundant, and it's this so rare in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And so that that's a new set of problems to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, information is now abundant, and also it's competing with other information in this hyper-competitive landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is doing the same kinds of things, where it is making itself hyper-palatable. It is like any trick that anyone can do to get you to stay on a website, they will do it, both on the platform's side and on the creator side. Like you and I are in collaborations with these algorithms,
mm-hmm.
and we respond to the signals that they send us as creators, in terms of what we want to create. So what I think about this long term, I don't know how it goes, but what I think about this long term is that every other media revolution has created a lot of instability and a lot of like just sort of toss the table, you know, like you're just playing a game and then you just flip the board.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels a little like we flipped the board. And in the long term, we're going to look at the internet like we look at books. Like nobody's like, boy, books were a bad idea. But at the time,
yeah, some
people were like, books were a bad idea. But we need to control these. We need to limit them. We need to make sure that only the king can decide what gets printed.
That's true. But then having said that, right, like the reason people thought books were bad is because, you know, like say the Catholic Church are like, these Protestant books are, including the Bible, are terrible. You know, don't go reading these things. And then now we're like, oh, we're really glad that happened, because we kind of now agree with a lot of the stuff that was being read. So like to see this technological revolution as good, do we all kind of need to start really believing in the kind of the crap, the junk food, the junk information?
I think you're wrong about whether it's actually like that information was good. So the most popular book for like 150 years was the Malleus Maleficarium, which was like, here's how you identify and kill witches. So like that was a bad book, and it was really popular. And like Martin Luther people hated that guy.
Yeah,
he was really reckless.
Yeah,
you know, there were a lot of wars about this stuff. A lot of people died.
Yeah,
and one of the things I try to keep in mind is that Martin Luther was also wrong about God. I mean, from my perspective. Lutherans, you should have tuned out for that bit.
So
sorry. But like, the Enlightenment didn't follow immediately from the revolution.
So what did it follow from?
The Reformation. That's the thing that we're going to see. Like what follows from where we're at right now.
I see.
I think it followed from a lot of time, and like I'm not a historian or an expert on that era, but like what I mean is that it didn't happen like 20 years later. It happened like hundreds of years later.
Yeah. You said Martin Luther was wrong about God from your perspective. I don't want to do the thing that people like me do, which is like bring you onto my show and ask you about the thing that we talk about, because then we'll get the clip. Hank talks about God. That's not what I'm trying to do.
Well, you're going to make a thumbnail, Alex. It's going to say something.
It's going to have a big picture of crucifix. And I just wonder what you mean by that. I don't know if you've really spoken about your views.
I mean, a little bit.
God and spirituality and religion and stuff. Do you have those views? Do you talk about them? Are you willing to talk about them?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an atheist. I think that I'm an atheist in the way that like when people think about what God is, I think that thing doesn't exist. I don't know about some people, like in terms of how the universe started.
Yeah.
Like I don't have an answer to that question. And so like in that way I'm agnostic. So like maybe there was a sort of like a person who set the scene and pushed go.
Yes.
But from everything I have seen since then, it all kind of follows. Like it all and this is new. Like I think that we haven't for that long had a coherent story of how Earth happened, about how the solar system happened, about how evolution happened.
Yeah.
But it, you know, every time we have sort of thought that maybe it was magic, it turned out to not be.
Where we go.
So I don't think that there's like a thing that like, you know, fathered a child and that was and that child was able to do, you know, miracles. And, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's like
you want me to completely look the part?
and so like
no way.
What I am.
Do you have any idea how much makeup that it?
There's like an emptiness I think that can create. But I'm like I don't know how many. Shouldn't say I'm generations into this. My parents raised me as a Christian,
right?
But like, you know, we are generations into this questioning.
I guess this outfit ain't too bad.
And what I see is like
bandages are
a really
annoying,
powerful technology.
Never mind.
Like people are like, do you think God exists? And I'm like, well, I think that God exists in that like he is an extraordinarily powerful force in the world. I think that, and like what I don't want to say because it sounds like I'm diminishing it.
Forget it.
And I'm not, because like this is what I believe, and what I believe is like human creations that like work together to make something that is, as far as we know, has never been done before. And we're little babies, and we have no idea what we're doing. We weren't following the instruction manual, and yet 8 billion of us are able to like do this together. This is one of the tools that allows us to do that, and so. In the way that I think that there are plenty of illusions that I go by, and you know, some of them are unavoidable illusions. Like I think they're like deep inside of my neurology, like unavoidable illusions. I think that like this might be, this is a thing that is real, practically. But it's not real for me, so it's not like. But like I am often jealous. Like I wish that I had some reason to go to a room on Sundays and like hang out with my community.
Do you have any idea how much makeup that it takes?
And people have tried to.
No, but the only way to do it is to threaten them with eternal fire.
Well, it is
because what other reason would you get out of bed on Sunday for?
I think there is something to be said for the fact that you kind of, in order to actually get that kind of stuff, like the actual, you get out of bed and you go somewhere. You have to actually believe it, right?
It's so powerful. It's so good. Like, it has the potential to be, and is often so good.
Yeah.
I don't want to discount that many times when it is not good, and when it is harmful to individuals, and has been, you know, it's like, does religion help you think we're all in this together, or does religion help you think God versus your God? You know?
Yeah, and some people have liked to talk about the concept of, like, practical truths, or metaphorical truths that we sort of treat as though they're true, and it makes us all sort of work well together. And I've always thought that only works to some extent. Like, a lot of people are kind of culturally religious because they don't really kind of believe it, but they think that if we all did believe it, we'd have a better society. And I think when it comes down, you know, to the wire, that doesn't work, because it's like the rule that the gun is always loaded, which is a really good rule to have. Like, if you own a gun, the gun is always loaded. It's not. But we're going to treat it as though it is, because everything works out better that way. But if somebody breaks into your house and you need to go and defend yourself, you're not going to actually pick up the gun that you know is in fact not loaded. So I think, like, when it really comes down to making those important life decisions, you have to actually believe the thing for it to, like, properly work.
Well, it can be a gradient. It can do some things and not others.
Yeah, I think.
There is also, like, there's things that I know that I believe. I think that I believe biologically. Like, I have no choice but to believe, but I completely accept that they may be not true, like free will.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Like 100%. If physicists keep telling me that free will probably doesn't exist, I'm like, they're probably right. Like, I'm not them, and they know more about this than I do. But, like, my biology tells me very clearly that free will is real. So, like, there's something happening in my brain that's like, you are an actor.
Yes.
And almost it wouldn't work if my brain hadn't created, if that's an illusion, it wouldn't be possible to be in the world doing the things that we do without that illusion.
The free will as a concept is like a prediction machine. Or like the fact that we can't really predict, we don't know the future, we don't have all the information of the future. Therefore, something must predict. Yeah, I didn't know
It's been a long
that would
time.
happen.
I'm Durin. Everyone used to call me Mini Durin, but as you can see, I'm not really mini anymore. Do you find my appearance strange? To tell you the truth, it's still a little strange to me. I have so much to learn. I hope you don't mind if I ask you for help.
Of course, the Hoda. And stringless.
Illusion, so it's like really deep down, and I don't even believe, I believe it the way that I believe the chair is here, right? Like Jordan Peterson, I believe it in a way where I what's that? where it like if my life depended on it, I would be like, yeah, no, that's real. I decided to be here.
Which like is a bit involuntary. Like when I ask you to reflect on it, is the chair really here? Well, like maybe, okay, technically this could, but it's like, it's so, you just came in and sat down on it. You must believe it's there because you had a pretty strong level of confidence that you wouldn't just like fall down into the earth. And it's just there. You just have that belief as a result of like stimulations of your sense data. It just kind of happens. And it, in fact, even with something like sense perception, I don't know what you think about this as a science man, but like we think that we've got these sort of just windows into reality, that we've kind of like, we exist sort of up here in our skull, and then our eyes are like big windows and got ears, and we just sort of experience the world as it is, like we're looking out of a window. When it seems pretty plausible to me that actually we're kind of like a bit of a machine that has a bunch of sensors on the outside. And a helpful analogy for this that I like to talk about, that I borrowed from Bernardo Kastrup, is like being in an aeroplane, flying an airplane with the windows shut. Because you can do it because there are sensors on the outside and it gives you all the information on the dashboard. But the information on the dashboard is not the clouds and the air pressure. And so maybe our sense data is doing a similar kind of thing.
That's basically right. I mean, so they call it the sensorium, and that different animals, different species have different sensoria. And like you and I might have different sensoria. You know, you might hear differently, you might see differently, like and like it seems, interestingly, it seems like across the species, the sensorium is pretty consistent. Like red is probably kind of red to you. It's probably kind of red to me. Like that stuff seems to be roughly the same. But taste and smell are two that definitely can be quite different from person to person. But much bigger than that is like, you know, bats or dolphins. You know, it's stuff that like fish see very differently than we do. And there's lots of sensations like electrical fields that we don't have. There's colors that we can't see that other animals can see. And that just like sort of proves the point that like this that I'm seeing right now is the version of reality. So there's a thing, like I don't think that the things don't exist.
Exactly.
People are like that. Some people are like that. I don't get that. But the things are there, and like there's something happening, and I'm detecting that, and that is allowing me to move around in the world. But this, like what I'm seeing, isn't the world. This is the version of the world that I am able to detect, which is different from other animals.
And that came to mind because when you were talking about illusions that you kind of know are illusions but believe in anyway, you know, somebody who's religious might listen to something like that and go like, you know, this isn't an illusion, like this isn't just some made-up thing that it's like there are illusions that we can talk about that are so fundamental that they are as sort of true as like the chair that I'm looking at right now. So like to say something is an illusion isn't to say that there isn't something real, something that causes it, and that it serves an important purpose, and that it's like there really is something going on, but that somehow our interaction with it or our description with it isn't the thing itself. I think, do you know what? I think theologians agree with that. That like, if there is a God who created the universe and exists like timelessly and limitlessly, then as long as you are imagining something, you are like not imagining that thing. Because you just you can't. It's like not what your brain is capable of doing.
Right. Yeah. And like I find this. I find that there are so many more interesting things than that, and like that's like one of my big problems with not with the idea of a God, but like with my ability to engage with it. Where I'm just like, nah. Like it feels a little bit like. Whatever is mysterious, or like it's like a morphing definition, which is very like it's unfalsifiable. So it's just sort of like always out there, like a thing. And it does feel a little bit like sort of it's about the philosophy of it. It's about like, can we put words together in such an order such that we've proved that God exists? Which is not. I don't know. That's not.
It also just seems to me like not what it's all about. Like as if I sometimes sort of imagine that you'll get to the pearly gates and God will be there, and it's like, oh, you've been a good person and you've given to charity and you've believed in Christianity and you're a Lutheran. Oh, you don't agree with premise 55 of Ed Faze's 100 premise argument for the existence of God. Oh, no, sorry, it just feels like that's not what it would be about. And so traditionally
Okay, well...
Thunder!
Time to send those...
Okay, well, that was nice and all, but I gotta sleep at some point, probably now. So yeah, that's going to be it for the stream. Good luck, fun, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Спиздила удачу!